Good morning. It is truly an honor and a privilege to stand before you today. I count it all joy, and so I extend the joy that God has blessed me with to this beautiful congregation. To the leadership of the Beth Torah, man, thank you for inviting me out and opening up the doors. To Mr. or Brother Reuben, the Social Action Committee, Social Justice Committee, thank you for reaching out and coordinating and inviting me out once again. Brad Boer, awesome board member, and a great friend. Thank you for always being an advocate. Your beautiful wife, Ms. Carol, thank you for all that you guys do for Miles of Freedom. Mr. Ira Corman is oftentimes comes to our workshops and teaches. And so thank you for dedicating your time. I don't see Brother Rusty Dorkin, who is also a great friend and advocate. And so many friends. Our newest board member, thank you, Ms. Chris Phelps, for coming out and just attending today's service. And so it is with extreme honor that I'm able to come back into Beth Torah. The last time that I was here was November 20th, 2015. And we met in the fellowship hall next door, and it was a blessed time. And since then, a lot has transpired. As you just heard, I was nominated last year as a CNN hero. That experience in New York was awesome. I just came back from Los Angeles with the Annenberg Foundation, and they was doing some in-depth, board governance and stuff like that. And so that was super cool. But one of the things that God has blessed me to do since 2015 and now is I had a chance to spend 8 days in Israel. And this was in 2016-17. It was an opportunity from the Schusterman Foundation, and we flew into Tel Aviv and went from Tel Aviv all the way up to Jerusalem and got a chance to walk down the Rothschild Boulevard and got a chance to go to Masada, had a chance to go to the Western Wall in fellowship, and we actually partook in Shabbat at the Harp of David, and just having the opportunity to overlook the Mount of Olives and just being in this very spiritually baptizing place. It was just overwhelming for me, but at the same time, it was very encouraging. And so I kind of come back, with the mindset of empathy. And I believe that is one of the things we, as a creation of people, must learn to do moving forward, is creating spaces of empathy. That even though I may be different and may come from a different community, may have been raised up in a different environment, can I create a space of empathy in order to understand and assist you and truly be the brother that I know or the sister that I know God created me to be? And so it was with all of this that Brother Reuben, with his work hours, he would send me the information on what I needed to be aware of and read about. And I got the word teruma, which is the Torah presentation that was read today, and studying that and reading that and understanding that this derives from Moses when the commandments was given and the offerings, and God was saying, you tell the people to bring an offering. And not only bring an offering, but I want you to build a sanctuary. Now, the parallel reading that I was given was from the Haftarah, and it was in the book of Kings. And now, when you go to the book of Kings, you understand that Solomon, after his dad wanted to build a temple, Solomon was blessed with the opportunity to build a temple. And interestingly, when you read it, Solomon wants to build a temple because they have reached a point of rest. And so he says, I've reached a point of rest, and I want to build a temple in order to thank and appreciate and have a place of God. And I'm reading this and I asked God, what do I present today? And God gave me a couple of things, and I want to just give them to you as we dialogue for just a bit. The first thing is God asks us to bring him an offering. Bring me an offering. And that entails appreciation. The second thing is God wants us to build a sanctuary. That entails habitation. It's one thing for me to bring a gift to you, but it's something totally different when I allow myself to become vulnerable, that we begin to habitate with one another, to go coexist, to associate beyond any ethnical backgrounds or educational differences, the opportunity to come together and commune, which is what God wants to do to us. But the scriptures also say, how can you say that you love me whom you've never seen and hate your brother whom you see every day? The challenges that we are overwhelmed with is presented to us on a daily basis. And looking at that and reading that, I thought about my story, and the thought came to me, our ultimate teruma is to give our life as the sanctuary for God to dwell in, so that his work may be done in the creation that he created for us to exist in. What happens when you don't have anything physical to give? I was raised up in Oak Cliff. My dad, mom and dad, I oftentimes relate us as very spiritually, structurally raised up. I say that we probably went to church about 20 days out of the week. Yeah, my dad found spirituality very, very early on, and he was one of those people that when he found it was so good to him that he stuffed it down anybody else's throat. And being that I was one of his children, I had no choice but to digest what I was given. And so it came a point, I have two younger brothers and one older sister, and I went to Skyline High School at the age of, at 15 through 16, 17, 18, and I eventually graduated from Kimball High School, and I learned a lot. May 15, 1994, I was 19 years old, and I was in Oak Cliff with some of my friends and paid one of my friends to drive me from Oak Cliff to North Dallas. I stayed by Love Field Airport on the street called Crest Haven. Crest Haven is right off of Bluffview, and Bluffview is a street that curves off of Lemon Avenue. And so my friend drove me from Oak Cliff to North Dallas, and his girlfriend stayed on the corner of University and Roper, so he was going over her house. We got to her house first, and I paid my friend $5. I said, man, I'll be all right. I stayed right around the corner. If you're familiar with the North Dallas area, it's literally a couple of blocks from University and Roper to Crest Haven and Bluffview. I got out the car, walked up University, got to Lemon Avenue. Remember, I'm 19 years old, looking at the airplanes as they fly off the tarp and walking in front of the Sewell Cadillac shops, looking at the Suburbans and stuff as they outline the streets. And I get to Bluffview, and I go down Bluffview. I didn't have a phone at this point in time. As a matter of fact, cell phones hadn't even really came out. So that goes to show you how long ago this was. But on the corner of Lovers Lane and Bluffview sits a Red Coleman liquor store. And so I stopped there to call my friend James to tell him I'm right across the street. Can you cut the alarm off? I'll be right there shortly. He cut the alarm off, and it was the longest walk that I've ever taken in my life. I was picked up by the police. A shooting had happened at a club, New York, which was about 5 or 6 miles away by Bachman Lake. And the police picked me up. I told them who had just dropped me off. They didn't listen to anything. They took me to the Texaco and took me out of the police car. Police lights and everything is everywhere. And I'm placed in a police car and taken to homicide. When I get to homicide, I then find out that I'm arrested for a murder and attempted murder that I had no knowledge of. And I tell the detective, I gave him the phone numbers of everybody who I was with. I gave him 6 phone numbers. Keeping in mind, I had just got arrested about 30 minutes after this crime had happened. The description of the shooter was 6'2", 6'4", real dark complected. It didn't even fit me physically. The clothing that he had on was a white shirt and pants. I had on a white shirt and shorts. So by any means of the stretch, I should have never been arrested, however I was arrested. One of the hardest phone calls that you can make is when you were supposed to have been going to TSTC Waco for plastics engineering, because that's the college that I was getting ready to go to. That's what I studied at Skyline High School. But the phone call I make to my mom and my dad is to tell them that I'm in Louisville County Jail with a bond of $350,000 for a murder and attempted murder that I have no knowledge of. What happens when you don't have anything to give? We become the ultimate sacrifice. On the other end of that phone was my mom and my dad. My dad passed 6 months before I got out. If you read my case is one of the law book, it's in the law books, Ex parte Richard Miles. It actually sets the standards of an individual that's wrongfully incarcerated with no DNA and no confession. And when you read my case, what you'll find out is my mom and dad, because we didn't have the financial resources, for my transcripts, which is $3,000, I had to file my own writ of habeas corpus with no transcripts, which was denied. My mom and dad gave of themselves, and they began to volunteer at a young lady's office named Miss Joyce Ann Brown, who was also a young lady that was wrongfully incarcerated, started an office in South Dallas, and they began to volunteer there, and they gave of themselves. We're talking about teruma, right? The gift, to elevate, to lift yourself up when nobody else is around. Sometimes we got to encourage ourselves because nobody is around to encourage us. My mom and dad began this plight, and what they found out as they began this plight was we was fighting an animal that we had no knowledge of. We were not educated in the legal system, and so therefore we were subjected to the system in which we was placed up under. My dad went and purchased my police records and sent them to me, and no real proof of evidence in it that I could use, but I filed my writ anyway. It was denied in 2000, and at that point in time, I felt like God had me there. And I was angry. I've experienced every emotion under the book: anger, hatred, prejudice, suicide. Because when you're put in a situation to where as you have no answers, you can only express what comes to you. And while I was incarcerated, I met a guy named Benjamin Spencer. Benjamin Spencer is still in prison. He's been incarcerated over 30 years, and he's innocent. And Ben cuts her on Cofield Unit. I did all of my time on Cofield Unit. Cofield Unit is the biggest prison in Texas. It houses over 5,000 people on this one unit. And Ben told me, he said, if you're really innocent, you need to write Centurion. Centurion is an innocence organization in Princeton, New Jersey. And they are one of the only organizations that work on non-DNA cases. 1997, at the age of 21, 22, I'm sitting down writing this organization with prayers and hopes that they would write me back. We didn't have the money to pay for appellate counsel, and so we continuously gave of ourselves. But interestingly, as we was giving up ourselves, God was actually abiding more in us. And that's the thing that I believe that God wants us to understand. When we hold on to these materialistic things, when we hold on to hatred, when we hold on to anger, when we hold on to pride, we don't give God room to come in. And so basically what we say is, I'd rather hold on to my thoughts than allow you to come in and change my behaviors. I'd rather hold on to what I feel is right than allow you to come in and show me what's right. And we begin to put ourselves as a God over the Creator that created us to worship God. And so as I'm incarcerated, I did 13 years around about this time, and Centurion Ministries accepts my case. Centurion Ministries is the organization in Princeton, New Jersey. And what they found and sent was the police records, the same police records that my dad purchased 4 years prior. And when our dad went to the Dallas Police Department, they gave him about 25 pages. We did it up under the Freedom of Information Act. When Centurion went, they gave them 85 pages. And it was in these documents, as I sat in my cell on Cofield Unit, I began to read my transcripts. And there was a phone call. I went to jury trial August of 1995. The first page in this police records was a phone call that went to the Dallas Police Department from a young lady who was getting beat up by her boyfriend, and she was telling them that her boyfriend was the one that did this shooting. She said, I don't know who you guys have locked up, but my boyfriend has been bragging about killing somebody and shooting a person last year in 1994 by Bachman Lake. He said, I know y'all have the wrong person locked up, and he does too, but this is the person that did it. This is who he's with. And the police had this before I went to jury trial. Also in the police records, there was evidence that was telling them that the people that was on trial had beat up somebody and pulled a shotgun out on them, and it was charges, assault charges, pending during the time of trial. But none of this was brought out in jury trial, and it yielded me to 60 years in prison. But as Centurion Ministries began to reveal the evidence that was not disclosed, the exculpatory evidence, the Brady violation, it began to unlock the keys. But before I got out of prison, I had to give up a lot of things. And a lot of times we feel like that the gifts that we give up are things that we really need to keep. Remember the children of Israel as they came out? The offerings that they gave up, as you heard earlier, was the resources that they received from Egypt. We hold on to things that are really not ours. We get attached to them because they look good. They give us value. But God really wants us to know that I have created value in you. And if you understand the value that I have put in you, then you will understand what's in your pocket has nothing in comparison to what I've already created in you. And so I had to give up the anger, the hurt, the pride, the suicidal thoughts, the hatred. I had to give all of that up. And I had to forgive a system that I felt like had really oppressed me in an era in which we are supposed to say that slavery has truly been abolished. The reality is it hasn't. The reality is we have stood our foundation upon the 13th Amendment, which allows us to re-enslave individuals. The only difference in what's going on now and what went on back then is slavery now is open to everybody. In a cell, you can have an African-American man with a white man. You can have a Hispanic with an Indian. You can have an Asian with an Ethiopian. It's not segregated. And so it's incumbent upon us to understand that we as a community of people, we need to do what we need to do to make sure that those individuals that are placed in these environments that disconnect us from family. When I went to prison, I bought a beeper. When I got out, it was iPhones. Technology had changed. When I went to prison, my dad was alive. When I got out, my dad had died of cancer. Disconnection from family. When I went to prison, I was a healthy 19-year-old. Due to the lack of medical assistance and all of that, I get out with hypertension, high blood pressure. All of these things that will impede upon me being successful out here. But who hears the cries of the oppressed? Only those who have been oppressed can hear the cries of the oppressed. I thought for a long time in prison, as I bring my conversation or my dialogue to a close, I studied the scriptures, and I grew up in church, and so I pushed myself because I was like, God, if you're real, I'm in a Joseph situation. I'm in a Joseph situation. I've read about Joseph, but God, if you are real, see, a lot of times we put our faith on our shoulders, but it never goes in our heart. Meaning I can talk my faith all day, but when I'm put in a situation to where my faith has to be tested, when that gold has to go through that fire, that's the proving of your faith. And I sat in that cell on that bunk, and I said, God, if you're real, I'm in a Joseph situation, and I want you. I need you to manifest yourself to me. And it's so true as the story goes. Joseph was wrongfully incarcerated, did about 12 years potential sexual assault, and released not only to help a nation, but to help his family as well. And I questioned, as I did last time, and this is why this moment right here, this is really sentimental to me, because God brings me back to answer a question. And I give this question to you. What would have happened if Ishmael and Isaac was raised up together? That's the question. That's the question. That's the hardest answer for us to consider today. But that's what God wants us to come back to. What would have happened? We see now what needs to happen, so we don't have to ask the question, what would have happened? It's time for us to give up the mental models, the thoughts of what we feel about the other person, what we feel like God wants us to do, and get in his light so that he can show us what to do. I walked out of prison at the age of 34 after spending 15 years, from the age of 19 to 34. My whole life was taken away. And so we started Miles of Freedom. And since 2012, we helped over 1,500 people return home, get jobs, build resumes. We have a shuttle service that has about 70 families that we keep connected to visit their loved ones that are incarcerated, because visitation is very important. We just started a fresh produce distribution at the Martin Luther King Jr. Center in South Dallas, June 19th. Since June 19th, through the assistance of the North Texas Food Bank, we've distributed over 300,000 pounds of produce to people in the Dallas community. Our fresh produce does not have any income restriction, nor does it have zip code restriction. We just want to feed people that need to be fed. This is what life is about. Asking God to give you the resources so that you can give those that need God. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this time. Peace be unto you.